So here we are back out by the woods again. Bob from Sorrento Hill. Thanks for stopping by. I'm out here on a little adventure today. Um, as you saw in my previous video, my logs are not quite dry enough to use for cordwood. So since I'm kind of at a stop on that, there's a couple other projects that I had in mind. One is working on the fence, which I will do some in a little bit later this afternoon. But right now, what I'm wanting to work on is a little project, a dream project of mine I've had in mind. I've wanted to do for some time, and it involves a beam that I've made out of a tree that I cut down, and that's to make what they call a spring lathe, a spring pole lathe, and this is something that the Vikings used them, and our early ancestors used them before they came up with the lathes that were powered by belts run by a stream. It's amazing if you've ever looked at one of these old factories that was run by off a water mill. It had have a series of the water mill would turn a big shaft that would run down through the factory, sometimes multiple shafts, and there would be a series of belts come off that shaft, and it would be different size gears at different places, different size pulleys, and they would just have these leather belts that would drive equipment. So it would drive something like a lathe here. But before that, if you were out there in the boondocks and you needed something round, you had a choice: bench, a shaving horse bench, and you could then use your draw knife to take pieces off to make it round, or you could carve it round, or you could make yourself a pole lathe. And basically what you do is you take a beam like this oak beam. This thing is 4 inches thick here, so it'll be good and steady, and you cut a slot in it, and then I take the ends, like I cut off here, and make what they call poppets. I used to think they were called puppets, but they're poppets. And I'll cut a piece in here that'll fit down in the slot, and a hole drilled in the side of it so you can drive a wedge in there to lock it in. And then in the surface of this will be like a lag screw that I'll screw in, making sure that it's perfectly straight with a point on the end of it, and those points will hold my workpiece. And then of course they'll be adjustable. This slot, this is a 5-foot long piece of oak. The slot is 4 foot long. With the space, I'll be able to do a piece, even allowing for the poppets and the springs. I'll be able to do a piece on this particular lathe up to 3 feet long to take and turn a spindle. And what powers it is on either end here will be a pole coming up. And what the Vikings used to do is they would set this up next to a sapling, a nice springy sapling. They'd tie a rope onto it. It goes down through the hole that I'm getting ready to cut, and you have a treadle, and you just push on it, and of course the tree would bend and then spring back. Well, to make it more flexible so you could use it in a workshop or wherever, what some of the early pioneers would do is they would put a pole, put a couple sticks here that would be flexible, and tie a rope to that and use the flex of those ropes, of those posts. And of course you have to replace them from time to time. Nowadays, when we're doing this, what a lot of people do is they'll put these uprights and they'll attach a bungee across it and use the bungee, so they use sturdier poles coming up that'll last longer, and just use a bungee. And what you do is then your cord is wrapped around the piece so that it turns, and then you get your tool in there and work it as it's turning. So you're able to make something round out of something square. You can even use this to make bowls. And so it's something that's fascinated me for a long time, something I've been wanting to build. So what I did is, this was a log about 8.5 feet long. I used my Alaska mill to cut the top slab off, and then make another cut to make it 4 inches thick. I think it's 4. Did I make it 4 or 3.5? Yep, 4 inches thick. And so now I've got to cut a slot in it for the poppets to fit in. And so I've been debating how I would do this. And so last night, as I was trying to get to sleep, because you know I'll be using my saw, and I'm doing this out by my kiln instead of up in my workshop area. And this saw will cut about, let me get it on the other side where I can measure it easier. This saw has a cut depth of just under 2.5 inches. Okay, and it's 4 inches thick. So how in the world can you do that? Well, I thought about it, thought, well, I can just transfer my measurement over and hope I get it right. But you know, there's a easier way to do that. So what my thought was, you know, when you're cutting a slot in something with a jigsaw, what you do is you drill some holes, you connect the dots, and then you cut from one hole to the next. And I thought, you know, I could do the same thing here. So what I'm going to do is I got a hole drill. I may be a little bit ambitious here. I'm trying a 1-inch one. And I'm going to drill some holes in at the corners I've got marked. And then on the other side, what I'll do is I will draw a line to join those holes once I get cut here, and then join it. And to cut this narrow part here, I'll have to get my Sawzall to do that part. But that's my plan here. And so I just thought I'd share with you some of the process of me making this thing, and with the eventual goal of, you know, like in just a week and a half, less than a week and a half, next weekend down in Doniphan is Current River Heritage Days. In about 5 or 6 weeks is the Ozark Heritage Festival, and it is, yeah, Heritage Festival of the Ozarks, I think it's called. Just a couple hours away from us. That's an annual event that's pretty big. So, and they always look for people to do demonstrations. And I thought, you know, it'd be kind of neat, the farmers market next year, instead of just having a static booth when we're there, is to actually be able to set this up and make a spindle, make a candle holder, make a bowl. Yeah, you can even use this to make bowls out of. That's what one of the things that the early pioneers, the early settlers would do, is they would make a blank and they would use this to make a bowl. So you know, that could attract a lot of attention, and it's just something I've always wanted to do. So last night I was thinking, how can I get this whole? I come up with a lot of great ideas while I'm laying there trying to get to sleep. Maybe that's one reason why it takes me so long to get to sleep. I do too much thinking. But at any rate, let me get to work here, and we'll see how this works. Okay. Okay, that means it's about to go through. Okay. All right. Well, that went fairly decent. This wood's got a lot more moisture in it than I thought it would have, but it shouldn't surprise me too much because that log's been sitting there on the ground well, just off the ground. I've had some logs on under it, half logs, some red cedar that wasn't really suitable for use in the house, that I've had under it to keep it up off the ground. But that wasn't too bad. Now we'll see if the rest of them go that well. Okay. All right, got those holes drilled. And how much battery did that use? It used up about half the battery. Now I get this thing, and I will plunge it down. I better use my safety glasses on this. Let's see my line. All right, I should have brought my other battery out. That cut used all this battery. All right, well, I got the thing cut out. I'm going to have to clean up the ends here, of course, because I drilled holes and then cut it out. And yeah, I'm going to have some cleanup to do on it, but I got that 4 foot thick by about 3.5 inch wide piece out of there. And with it being 4 inches, it's got plenty of strength to it. So now I will take this, now that it's a lot lighter. I cut probably 25% of the weight out of it. I'll take this up to the up to my workbench, and I will clean up my opening here. I got some cleanup to do on this end to get it all even, get that all cleaned up, and then I'll make my poppets that go in it. And also right here and right here is going to be where my uprights will be. And I'm really thinking what I'll do, since I got this nice piece of oak here that's good and sturdy, I'm thinking what I will do is I will cut this in half, and yeah, I think I'll cut that in half, and I'll use that for my uprights. I'll have to round the ends off, but that won't be so bad. And that'll be my uprights. That way, nothing goes to waste, right? And I will share with you some things that I discovered about my battery-operated saw while I was out here. Is I was thinking, I erroneously said, oh, my battery ran down. No, my battery did not run down. What happened is it was the battery getting hot. It was also the tool getting hot. I mean, the table, the circular saw was actually getting so hot enough that it was nice and hot in my hand. And so I think that was and then I pulled the battery out, and the battery had the first and third lights blinking off and on, off and on, off and on. And it was hot, and you put it on a charger and it won't charge. So I had to cool off first, and then once it cooled off, I hit the little button to check the charge, and it had 3/4 of the charge left. And I could take that cooled battery and the cooled tool and come out and use it. So these battery operated tools, they're great. They have their purpose, but they aren't meant for making for making 4-foot long cuts, 2¼ inches deep into oak, and being able to do the whole cut in one run. It's a combination of the battery and the tool getting too hot for that, and so it shuts down to protect itself, which is kind of a nuisance, but it's kind of good. And you know, you think, well, if you use an electric one, that wouldn't do that. Well, here's the thing: the electric one, it would keep going, but I can't help but think that sometimes that's why our electric drills and our electric power saws, you know, circular saws and our electric sawzalls and electric grinders and things like that burn up on us, is because we use them to the point where they're getting hot, and it's hot enough to damage the motor. It's hot enough to that the lubrication that's packed in the bearings starts to liquefy, loses its viscosity, and it can't lubricate the way it should. Sometimes it might even run out because it gets too hot, and it shortens the life of our power equipment. You know, I'm sure just about every one of you out there has probably gone through more than one circular saw, because it just got to the point after a while where the motor just it burned up. You know, it locked up. It wouldn't run, or you pull the trigger. You could spin the blade, but you pull the trigger and nothing happens. And it could be that you just burn up the wirings in the motor, because they don't do like these battery things and shut off if they get too hot to protect themselves. They just go until they burn up and quit. So anyways, just a little random thought there. But so it took longer than I was intending, because of a combination of a tool and the batteries getting hot and having to cool down. But I got that center piece out there. It's a lot lighter now. I'll bring it up to my workbench area after I clear a little spot here, and I will I'll do some fine tuning on that slot and make sure it's good and flat, you know, got flat sides, parallel, so that I can move my poppets back and forth in that slot without any problem. And then I'll start on the poppets for it. Like I said, I think I was going to use branches for my uprights, but I've got that piece. It's 3½ inches wide by 4 foot thick, or 4 inches thick rather, of oak. And that's some strong and sturdy stuff, and it's what, 48 inches tall. So that would be plenty to cut that in half, round the ends off to fit in the holes that I'm going to drill in there for my verticals, and then attach my bungee to the top of that, because that oak, it's probably going to be sturdier than just about anything else I could use. So, and that way it doesn't go to waste. I'll still have to use some little trees. I've got some cut down back here that I cleared out for the fence that would be perfect for that, to make legs for this thing. And they're hickory, so they're going to be pretty sturdy too. All right, well, let me get this thing up here and get started on the slot. And as I get holes drilled and get this thing stood up and start working on it, I'll show you what that looks like. All right, this is Bob. Thanks for joining me as I work on this crazy project of this, well, I guess it's not really a Viking pole lathe, because I'm not using poles, but anyways, it's a spring pole lathe. The way they would have done it back hundreds of years ago, before we had water power and steam power and electric motors to spin things, and use people power. And I'm looking forward to showing you what that's going to look like.